Hello everyone and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. And Steve, you've done it again. You've brought in another guest. So would you mind introducing him to us?
Yes, I'd love to. Hello FiST Chat fans, live from the Emerald City at the airport actually. We're departing after our wonderful ASC conference. I have James Byrne with us here to talk about blogging and his blog, Disease Prone, in particular.
Thank you, James, for coming on the show. It's great to have you here.
No problem at all.
Absolutely. So, before we sort of start chatting through a couple of the topics that you're here about, can you maybe just give us a bit of a background as to who you are and what makes you tick?
Sure. Okay, so I started an undergraduate degree in science at Adelaide Uni in about 2004.
Yeah.
And then worked my way through and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do the whole way along. I started wanting to be a physicist, and it took me a year to drop that. And then I started just following biology pretty much all the way through. And I did honours, and then I'm still in the process of finishing off my PhD. Honours went really well, PhD less so. And halfway through my PhD, I realised that I didn't want to be a career scientist. So instead, I started writing for the internet. So I started on a blog called Disease of the Week, and I wrote that with a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And that was a very simple idea that we would just write about a disease every week. And that got a bit of traction. And then I got offered a place at a blogging community called Field of Science. And then from Field of Science, I sort of leapfrogged to Scientific American, where I blog now on and still maintain a blog called Disease Prone there.
So what year did you start blogging?
I started blogging about halfway through 2009. But I say blogging, I was writing things and then putting them on my computer and not showing anybody. I only started showing people about November 2009.
That's it, Ben. We're ditching video. I'm just going back to writing.
That's right. We'll just do it in a cave somewhere and being conspicuous. So, I mean, how do you find writing for the internet? Is it an interesting thing? What type of feedback do you get from it?
Well, it's funny. There are people who do it for a job. And they do it for different reasons. I started doing it because I needed instant gratification because my PhD was not going well, and I needed something that worked and I could be proud of straight away. So that's why I started.
Does that entail getting like a whole bunch of Facebook likes or something like that? Given we're in that generation.
True, but at the same time, I just wanted to finish something. I wanted to be able to say that's done. I can do something else again.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was sort of the main drive behind it, but.
I don't think the camera's
it's good though. It's really cathartic actually, especially when something doesn't go right. I can just bang out an article and feel good about having done something, even if I haven't really achieved anything worthwhile, so to speak, that day. Something big.
Absolutely. I think Steve and I can feel a bit simpatico with you there, as we seem to do
Yeah,
that's right. We do our weekly videos. So there you go. There you go.
Well, I might add to that. If only the internet had been invented when I'd done my PhD, I probably would have become a blogger as well.
It's never too
finished.
It's never too late. Never too late. So just on your blog, you write about a lot of unusual diseases. Is that right? Would that be a fair way to categorize it? I mean, we can probably. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say the articles that I write sort of tend to fall into two categories. They're either about a disease in particular, where I'll go into sort of history of disease, the way it's treated, the pathogenesis, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or I'll just offer commentary on things that crop up in biomedical science, that kind of thing. So they're the two major sorts of articles that I'll write. And unfortunately, the way it's moving at the moment is I tend to write more commentary pieces than proper stories and interesting sort of diseases at the moment. But that's only because I'm limited in time at the very minute. So
just on that though, everyone does have a morbid fascination with disease. Is that what got you into it?
Well, I mean, I was studying biomedical science. In particular, I was studying microbiology, so I was learning about infectious diseases and finding out about the way that the agents that cause the diseases, and then what happens when you're interacting with this microbial environment. So that was what drew me in, and then from there, I sort of started reading more widely on just unusual things, and so I just get stuck. And once you get stuck on a theme, really, I just started writing about them because I figured it's not fair that I would know about this and other people shouldn't. So
well, then in that case, then what are some of the more memorable pieces that you've written personally? You know, the diseases that excite you and scare us.
Well, there's a couple of diseases that jump out at me as interesting. Probably one of the ones that I wrote recently was about Capgras syndrome or Capgras delusion, depending on which hemisphere you're from. And the Capgras and a related one called Cotard syndrome are about the inability of, it's more of a psychological disease, but the inability to register an emotion with facial recognition. So you recognize the face, you can attach a name to that face, but you can't necessarily attach an emotion. And so, you know, in some cases that manifests as believing the person that you're talking to is an imposter of that person. So you might think your wife for 30 years is suddenly someone playing your wife.
Is this a bit like the Hollywood version of Body Snatchers?
Very much so, yeah. So there's that. If it gets really bad, there tends to be a shift of the way that it manifests, and when really bad, it sort of develops something called Cotard syndrome, where people actually believe that they're dead, and that's because they have a lack of emotional attachment to anybody, and so they rationalise that as being the only way that would be possible is to be a dead person, and the way that they justify that position can sometimes be incredible.
Does that mean that they think they're actually ghosts?
Not necessarily. Some think that they're zombies.
See live people.
Yeah, no, something like they can sort of just believe that they're dead and they're not sure how they exist. Some people believe they're zombies and that their flesh is rotting, and so they take very little care of themselves, don't bother to watch, that kind of thing, and then that leads to complications down the line. But there all sorts of things like that. Those quite recently, those were probably the ones that sort of I felt like I had to write about those.
So, but is that an actual? I guess kind of separating that from being some sort of psychological problem as opposed to a disease. Is there a specific reason why it would be called a disease?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I guess I use the term disease, I sort of drift to make sure that I can write about interesting things.
Okay.
There's only so many times you can write about, diarrhea and cholera before you just get particularly, I mean, my wife's a nurse that works in lower GI health, so
okay.
It'd be too much if it was shit on the blog and then shit at home as well. So.
GI for FiST Chat listeners is gastrointestinal. So
that'll keep everyone up, won't it?
and Ben, I believe you had a favourite from James's blog as well.
Yeah, just it's kind of a sad story. The Christmas disease blog. That can you tell us a bit about that one?
Yeah, actually, I haven't read about that. I haven't read much on that recently, so I'm a bit rusty. But essentially, it's X-linked hemophilia from memory.
Yeah,
and the only things like that are sort of nice. It was Christmas time, and I thought, well, if I just Google Christmas disease, I wonder what I'll find. And I was expecting to find things like increased rates of alcoholism, hospitalisation for falling over and electrocuting yourself on lights, that kind of stuff.
It's never happened to me.
but instead, I end up with a disease that's actually Christmas disease, which is not about Christmas at all. It's just the first guy that they characterised with it, his name was Christmas, so he gets the disease named after him.
Right.
So that was an interesting piece to write, and that's actually I feel kind of bad. I've been lazy the last few Christmases and just reused it a couple of times.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. It was just sad to hear that the guy, had to go through all those transfusions to go through the haemophilia, and then ended up contracting HIV from it. It's a little, it's very, but it's. I guess he kind of turned it around, and now that he's he's working towards screenings of donated blood and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a great story to read about.
Absolutely. There's a lot of the things you find, particularly when you start digging into these medical stories, is that there are silver linings, as much as not for him. for the medical community, you learn, and then you change the way that you do things. And so, the fact that did lead to the widespread screening of blood samples is an amazing thing that should have always been done. But when something like that happens, it is a big kick in the right direction, I guess.
Absolutely. I think now, if we move along in the last 5 minutes or so that we have, we've got to talk about some films as well, I guess.
I want to mention one other disease which fascinated me, and it's one of the ones that I need to get back and write about because I think everyone should know about it because it's ridiculous. It's called the Jumping Frenchman of Maine syndrome. It's very specific. It's a family. It's a family group or a bunch of related people who live in Canada. They migrated from Maine to Canada, and they're largely lumberjacks, and they have an exaggerated startle response. So if you jump up behind them and scare them, most people would just sort of start, and that would be the end of it. They would have sort of an adrenaline type reaction. These particular people, for no apparent physiological reason, their startle response is exaggerated. They start jumping up and down and can't stop for about half an hour. It's amazing. And you can see videos of it. You go and see. In fact, for a long time, there was a documentary done about it, and people thought it was a hoax. Because it's such a bizarre thing. But it's a real thing. You can startle these people and they will jump up and down for a very long time. And I can just imagine doing that to somebody and then jumping up and down to her and going, "Thanks, mate. This is my life for the next half hour."
Unbelievable.
I saw a whole family of those people at the nightclub last night. But no, seriously, we must get on to Hollywood film because that's a very important part of FiST Chat.
Yep, and I mean, we obviously there's been plenty of films out of there that have dealt with diseases and all sorts of things. Your average zombie film pretty much covers any of that. You got any favourites there, or?
Yeah, look, I think Contagion would be I have to see it first, but I feel like it will be because there's, from what I've read, the science.
Is this a pre-review?
Well, it's a pre-review. Yeah, the science I've heard though is very good, so that's the reason why I want to see it. So that's probably that one. But yes, there are some things like 28 Days and things like that are very interesting.
Yes.
Things like I Am Legend had like that sort of that virus element to it as well.
Yeah,
and that was very cool. So there are movies where it comes in. I don't know necessarily their favourites, but there are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you would have you seen Outbreak then?
Outbreak, I haven't. I'm not great.
That's all right. We forgive you.
No, I feel awful about it. No, there's about sort of 18 months ago, my wife and I sort of sat down and realised, look, we haven't seen the John Hughes sort of back catalogue. We haven't seen a lot of these, really classic films that get name dropped in all popular culture now. So we're working our way through. So I'll add it to my Netflix list.
Absolutely.
And I'll watch it.
If you need to know anything about these films, I think allaboutmovies.net is a good place to start.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Plenty of good reviews there by a guy called Todd Murphy.
Are you Todd Murphy?
No, I'm not.
He's a mysterious man who tends to stay in the shadows from time to time. So
a bit like a Contagion person.
Well, if he's not Todd Murphy, are you Todd and you Murphy? Is that the way it works?
No, that's putting a whole spin on it. It's just blowing my mind now.
This is conspiracy theory stuff.
Absolutely. So just wrapping up. So is there anything you're working on at the moment, or you're looking at doing, or?
Yeah, I guess I can sort of talk about it. There's some stuff that I'm thinking about. The blog's been really useful for me. It's sort of raised my profile to a certain extent amongst the online community, and being on Scientific American has been really useful. But I've found that, as I mentioned, I'm moving towards more commentary pieces on the blog, and that's not the reason I started. So I'm trying to come up with an idea of a way that I can write stories again and have them speak for themselves, because I think a lot of the internet science writing and a lot of the, certainly in the biomedical science community, is largely driven by commentary, and I think a way to stand out is to have passion in your writing, which I don't think there's much of. I think it's a lot of commentary. So I'm looking to start a website. At the moment, it's just an idea thing, but it's going to be sort of crowdsourced as talking to researchers, talking to science communicators, talking to the public. What interests you? If someone were to come up to you and say, "What's the most interesting thing you know?" What would you tell them? And then I'll get those articles, make them 500 words, put them on the website, and rather than being news driven by what's topical or what's what's going to come up next week or anything like that. It'll be news driven by what's interesting and what me as an expert thinks that you should know about my field.
Absolutely, that sounds great, Steve. You know what? We're going to be poaching some ideas, aren't we?
Absolutely. I just want to make one thing clear. If you can give us just a little bit of quick advice. If we're going to start a blog, is it the 500-word limit? Is it telling all your friends? Is it having a lot of friends? What is it?
Or is it having some backing, like how you said you're on the Scientific American guys, that sort of thing?
So I guess the first piece of advice I'd say is don't, because the more blogs that there are, the more you split my audience. So that's rubbish for me, so that'd be a horrible thing to say. But no, backing's not important. I didn't start with backing in mind. I've never written for money. In fact, the money that I earn from writing for Scientific American, which isn't much, admittedly, but the money that I do earn, I invest back in story ideas. So one of the things that I thought I would do is
inoculate your friends.
Well, no. One of the things I thought I would do is start an exercise series of posts on my blog. So I keep a profile on runkeeper.com, which is like a GPS tracking website, and all the exercise that I do, I plug into that, and then I publish all that data on the website. And so recently I upgraded my shoes that were falling apart and bought myself some actual running equipment, nice shoes and a shirt that I can actually attach my phone to so that I can track myself as I run. So I invest that stuff back into the blog because I figure I don't really need to profit from it. I've got a job that gives me money to do that. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, backing. The point is, backing's not important. If you want to start a blog, you start it for the reasons that you want to start a blog. If you want to tell people stories, start it to tell people stories. That would be the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back down to passion at the end of the day, doesn't it?
Which is what FiST Chat's all about.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we've run out of time, but thanks again, James, for coming on, and thanks again, Steve, for dragging him in, and the poor guy, and having to listen to our ramblings. So don't forget, our website's available at www.fistchat.com. You can get all our blogs there, and we'll probably provide some links to some of James's work as well this week. So that's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next week.